Now. So welcome everyone, I'm Alex Powley, I'm the acting head of school for the Coombs. I'm joined today by Miss Barnes, our deputy. Hi Kat, there we are. And I believe, I'm hoping that Miss Thompson will be joining us later as well when we go into the questions. So just as a kind of a bit of housekeeping before we get into the session, just as always, I'm sure we're all very au fait with video calling now, but just make sure your microphone is on mute during this briefing so that you can hear the messages clearly. But also, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat, and any questions that we have at the end of the session, we will go through and make sure that we go through as many as we can before ending the session. Any kind of questions that we don't have time to answer in the time that's given today, we will take away. So the leadership team will take those questions away and make sure that there is an answer given after the session. We'll also be sharing the resources within this PowerPoint, so we'll be sharing that as a PDF that will be available from our school website, and also the recording of this session will be here as well, or there as well. So if you need to access it again, you'll be more than welcome to. Okay, so Year 6 SATs 2022. So the last time any Year 6 class sat SATs was in 2019. So it's been a very, very long time, education speaking, since children have had to sit the Year 6 SATs at the end of Key Stage 2. So what are SATs? So SATs is a term. So SATs is kind of an incorrect term. It's one of those Americanisms. We don't officially have SATs in this country. They're actually called the end of Key Stage 2 assessments. Much more formal name that we lovingly refer to as SATs, but their proper title is the end of Key Stage 2 assessments. So these tests last for 4 days, beginning from Monday, the 9th of May. And ending on Thursday, the 12th of May. So for those parents who remember the Year 2 SATs all that time ago, where they were covered throughout the entire month of May, this is much more concentrated down to a week where it's a much more of a formal style of examination. So children will be sitting the following test papers. So on Monday, the 9th, they will sit both grammar, punctuation, spelling paper 1 and grammar, punctuation and spelling paper 2. On Tuesday, the 10th of May, we'll take a reading theme. So they'll sit the reading paper on that day. And then on Wednesday, they will start their math papers. So maths paper 1 and 2 will be carried out on Wednesday, the 11th of May. And then the final paper will be held on Thursday, the 12th of May, which is a reasoning paper. You'll notice there isn't a writing test in that list of tests for children to sit. So writing is assessed using evidence collected by your child's teacher throughout Year 6. So in terms of how we derive an assessment for writing, we look at evidence across their writing from the year. We look at what they can do independently, and from that, teachers look at a variety of standards and then kind of identify the standard that the child is achieving fully, and that's the standard they award. I have got a little caveat at the bottom there, just thinking that if any, so these Key Stage 2 tests will be taken on set dates unless your child is absent, and then if you have a child that's absent any day for whatever reason, they may be able to take them up to 5 school days afterwards. So there is a little bit of flexibility around these tests if your child is absent for whatever reason. So in terms of when and how the SATs are carried out, the tests will take place during normal school hours, but under exam conditions. So we will be kind of setting up classrooms to be fit for purpose in terms of exam conditions, and the children will see that as a slight change, but we will quickly revert each classroom back to normal classroom practice outside of the test. But the children will be on those test days will be experiencing their classrooms looking much more formal, where desks will be separated and it will be one child per desk. Throughout the test, children aren't allowed to talk to each other from the moment that the assessments are handed out or until they are collected after the test has ended. So again, linking back to those formal exam conditions. The completed papers are then sent away to be marked externally. So again, for people that remember their child sitting the tests in Year 2, where they're marked by the school, Year 6 tests or end of Key Stage 2 assessments are marked externally. And then the children's results are sent back to school at some point in July. The date does change, but it's definitely in the month of July. Just to kind of finish off this slide, I've got timings below so you can see roughly the length of each test. So they're not overly long. They are manageable times for a year 6 age child, again ranging from 45 minutes for the first SPAG paper all the way down to 15 minutes for SPAG paper 2, which is a spelling focused paper. In terms of specific arrangements for SATs, as you know, as you're aware that children in year 6 aren't all the same. There is a variety of needs. So those children that have additional needs, who have a similar provision in their day-to-day learning at school, may be allotted specific arrangements such as additional time, tests being opened early or being modified. For example, some schools may have children that need a larger print to read the test appropriately, or may need tests translated for them. So again, some schools will be in a scenario where they have to open the test early for those to make the reasonable adjustments for their child to kind of take part in that test. Some children may have an adult that reads parts of the test to them. Obviously not the reading paper, but other parts or other tests such as the maths and the SPAG. Those children may have an adult that reads to them. Some children may have an adult to scribe or write for them. Again, different parts of the test where they feel that support is necessary. Like I said, there may be some cases where if a child where English isn't their first language, they may have written or spoken translations of the mathematics reasoning papers. Some children may have a prompter, so that's a person who kind of taps the table or says their name at points where the adult feels the child is losing focus or concentration. And some children will have rest breaks to break up the test into smaller chunks so it's more manageable for them as well. And then there's final arrangements for children who are ill or injured during the time of the test. And like I said, there is flexibility in the timings of those tests for certain children. I've got this note here. If your child has an EHC plan, so that's an education, health and care plan, they are automatically allowed up to 25% additional time, except for the spelling paper, which isn't strictly timed anyway, because it's just working through a series of spellings. And again, if there are any children who need modified large print or braille versions of the test, they get automatically 100% additional time as well. So as you can see that these tests aren't a one-size-fits-all approach. The test is the expected standard, and we make sure that there are adjustments put in place for children that have those additional needs, and we do that at a school level, and we coordinate that very carefully, making sure that our groupings for children who sit the test are matched around certain needs to ensure that we have that equity provision for those children that need it. So in terms of what gets given to you in July, you'll be given the following scores. So the first score is the raw score. So that's the total number of marks achieved for each paper. You then get a scaled score, and the scaled score is how we determine the judgment of where the child is working at. So there's 3 pieces of information. I'll break it down for you in a moment. So the raw score, which is the total number, so say like 38 out of 40 marks. The scale score, and then a judgment of whether the national standard has been met. So after each test, the external markers will convert each raw score into a scaled score to show whether the child is working below, at, or above the national standard. When the scaled score is given, it's given a range from 80 to 120, but what we're looking for is a scaled score of 100 or more, means that child is meeting the national or the expected standard for that paper. There are no tests, there are no kind of higher standard tests for children that may be attaining or achieving more highly, but a scaled score, close to 120 would show that child is working above the national standard. So if those parents out there or carers out there who have children that sat the old, level, old SATs papers where there was a higher level 6 paper, that doesn't exist anymore. So all children sit the same test papers, but that scaled score would indicate whether they're working at the expected or national standard, or they're working at a greater depth within that expected or national standard. Now, the reason the scale scores exist is because the tests year on year, the question types do differ, and sometimes you may have a slightly easier test overall to answer, and then sometimes years later there may be the test may be slightly tougher than before. The scaled score ensures that those tests are scored equally. So, for example, to get a scaled score of 100, and if the test was easy, you would need more marks to get that scaled score. But say if the test the next year was harder, to still get a scaled score of 100, you would maybe need slightly less marks because it's acknowledging that a test is harder against the national standards. That scaled score ensures that the test and that score from the test remains equitable and measurable year on year. But what we're really looking for, and the kind of the important takeaway from this, is that when you see those results in July, you're looking for how close your child's score is to 100, which is the expected or national standard. So let's dive into the test papers then. So I'm just going to break down the different tests for you in terms of what they look like, what they cover, and then show you some examples as well. So we'll start with the Monday test, which is the grammar, punctuation and spelling, which are held on Monday, the 9th of May. Paper 1 is the longer paper where children will be tested on their understanding of grammar, punctuation and spelling generally. That will be from their understanding from year 1 all the way to year 6. So it's testing their learning journey and what they remember long term from what they've been taught. And then paper 2 is a shorter paper where children are tested on their spelling only. And they'll be asked to fill in the blank, and I'll show an example later. They'll be asked to fill in the blank within a sentence, attempt to spell out the word in the correct context. So, and again, I'll show you some examples where it has the sentence with a blank in the middle and the children put the spelling into the blank to make the sentence complete. So in terms of paper 1, it lasts 45 minutes and children be prepared by their class teacher so they are equipped with a good knowledge of technical vocabulary needed to identify and describe various aspects of grammar and punctuation marks. So when you look at the example questions in a moment, the language they use is highly technical, but we ensure the children are taught those technical words and what they mean. And we go to great lengths to ensure that we don't substitute the meaning of these technical grammatical terms with words they might find more accessible. So an example I was sharing with the Key Stage 1 parents in the meeting previously was that, many years ago, you'd have some schools that would call adjectives wow words, which makes sense on the surface, and it allows children to understand these words, kind of make your writing more exciting. But when but that doesn't help their technical understanding of written English. So it just makes sense to not kind of try to come up with jazzy terms that we feel help the children understand it better. We just make sure the children understand the technical terms. They can use that to inform the writing choices they're making. So the areas of focus in the first paper is grammatical terms and word classes, the functions of different sentences, being able to combine words, phrases and clauses, verb forms, tenses and consistency. It looks at punctuation, it looks at vocabulary, and it looks at standard English and formality. So there's a whole kind of sphere of knowledge that's wrapped around this test that children engage with. So at the bottom there, we've got grammar, punctuation and spelling requires a range of answer types such as circling missing capital letters, multiple choice questions, one-word answers, and there is no requirement for long formal answers. This is a very quick-fire, snappy test where it's just asking children to respond to questions, whether it's through ticking a box, labeling parts, or underlining, circling, all those kind of very quick ways of responding to a question. So I've got some examples here for you. So as you see here, question 1, take the sentence that must end with a question mark. So again, that's testing children's knowledge of things they were taught all the way back in year 2. So again, it's about the child's learning journey and what they have learnt as they've journeyed through the primary education system. You can see here, so that's an example of ticking an option from multiple choices. Question 6 is making sure they're circling the correct word, so it's complete in standard English. So instead of we was, we were, for example, and instead of I were, it's I was. So making sure that children understand by circling the correct word. And again, question 23, where they're drawing a line to match each word to its antonym as well. So again, you can see it. So again, very quick fire and very accessible question types for children to tackle, but exploring a very large domain of knowledge across their understanding of grammar, punctuation, and spelling. So in terms of SPAG paper 2, grammar, punctuation, spelling paper 2, that's a much shorter paper lasting approximately 15 minutes. Essentially, it's the teacher reading the questions out to the class and working through one spelling at a time. So as you can see here, there's an example question here where it says, Omar put the cutlery back in the, and there's a space. And that space is where the targeted spelling would go. So we can see here from the answer the answer sheet below that the word in the spelling test would have been drawer. So Omar put the cutlery back in the drawer. So when the teachers are reading this out to their class in this test situation, they will say something like spelling 19, Omar put the cutlery back in the, with a pause, drawer. And then they would say the word is drawer, and then the teacher would repeat the sentence, Omar put the cutlery back in the drawer. And then children would then have an opportunity to write the spelling down rather, and then they'd move on to the next spelling. So the time given is 15 minutes, but it's a loose 15 minutes because you're working at the pace of the group. So to ensure that every child has a chance to work through those spellings in a meaningful way. And again, there you've got an example there. Again, Ellen's gold bracelet was her most treasured possession. And again, the teacher has a very strict structure in how to read out the test questions so that children can get the spelling for the correct context. So moving on to reading, the test will be on Tuesday, and so it's the paper focused purely around reading on that day. So each day has a specific subject focus. So Monday is SPAG, Tuesday is reading, and Wednesday and Thursday are maths focused. The assessment, again, focuses on just the comprehension elements of reading. So it doesn't focus on the child's fluency or decoding abilities. It's purely focused on whether the child's comprehension is age appropriate and meets national standard. It is a 60-minute long test, including reading the text and answering questions. And within the actual text themselves, there tend to be a different set of texts, which can be any combination of non-fiction, fiction, and poetry. And it tends to be, in the past, it's roughly been one of each, but you never know. This year, you could have multiple non-fiction pieces, or you could have multiple fiction pieces, but it tends to be a variety across the three. Now, just like in the SPAG paper 1, the reading paper focuses on areas which are known as content domains. So these are areas of knowledge within a child's comprehension skill set or comprehension knowledge. So the first one, there'll be questions around a child given or explaining the meaning of words in a context. There's questions around retrieving and recording information or identifying key details from fiction and non-fiction. There'll be questions around summarizing the main ideas from more than one paragraph. There'll be questions around making inferences from the text or explaining and justifying inferences with evidence from the text. There may be questions around predicting what might happen from details stated and implied in the text. There may be questions around identifying or explaining how information or content is related and contributes to meaning as a whole. There may even be questions around identifying or explaining how meaning is enhanced through the choice of words and phrases. So think about that authorial intent. And then the final one, making comparisons within a text. So again, the reading paper draws upon a vast battery almost of knowledge. And these are all areas of comprehension that your children would have been working within and towards throughout their entire curriculum journey. So these things aren't just reserved for year 6. These question types would have been with your children all the way from year 1, all the way through their curriculum journey. So they are comprehension strategies that your children will be used to when they come to tackle this test. And very differently from the SPAG paper, there are a range of question types, and I'll show you some further examples as well within the reading paper, ranging from multiple choice and one-word answers, but also much more kind of longer, more formal paragraph-like responses as well. So it's a much different paper to the SPAG paper. Just to show you a few examples. So there's an example based on the first text from a previous paper, which is space tourism. And then the question here, worth 1 mark, how do you get from the spacecraft to a space hotel? And again, that's focused around retrieving and recording information. So I've got the knowledge domain at the bottom there of this slide, but the child being able to retrieve and record information or identify key details from fiction and non-fiction. So they would have to look at this text and kind of peel off the information, the relevant information, in order to answer that question. And again, that's quite a short response, and it's 1 mark, as you can see there on the right hand side. So it's quite a short response answer. It shouldn't be multiple sentences, because it's just really one phrase or one sentence to convey the answer to that question. For further reading examples, so this is based on a further text called Giants. So it's got here, so this is the actual poem for Giants is on the top right here, which I'm circling. Again, this is another question based on being able to retrieve or record information. So question 17 says, gentle and small and frail. And then which part of the snail do these words describe? Circle the part of the snail in the picture below. And again, looking at the poem on the right-hand side, the child has surmised that gentle, small and frail is relating to the antenna on the snail. Again, using the language and the meaning to retrieve and infer the answer to that question. But again, a very different question type to the one we just saw. Further examples, so this is based on text 3 from a previous paper, which is the Lost World. Again, 36, so this is about prediction, based on what might happen from details stated and implied. So question 36, based on what you have read, what does the last paragraph suggest might happen to the explorers next? And then use evidence from this paragraph to support your prediction. So again, that would be a kind of a 2 mark question, as you can see there. So really you'd be looking for the child's prediction and then something from the text that supports that prediction. So as you can see here, there are some examples of 2 mark responses. I'll just give you 30 seconds just to read those, so you can see how the responses to those questions correlate to the child being able to predict and respond to that question in a much more fuller way than the other question types we've looked at. So as you can see here, there's a mix of kind of personal opinion and then linking it and justifying their choice through the text. So that's where those 2 marks are derived from. Again, it's a much fuller explanation than, say, the other questions that we've looked at in previous question types. So that's reading it and SPAG in a nutshell, which leaves us with maths. So maths, as I said earlier, takes place on Wednesday. And the first paper is an arithmetic paper. So there is a 30-minute timer on this one, and there's 40 marks for this paper. It covers the 4 operations, so division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. There's also mixed operation calculations that require BIDMAS to solve, as well as questions around number properties, calculating percentages of amounts, calculations using decimals, and calculations using fractions. So I'm just going to go through some exemplar questions for each of those things that are highlighted in that paragraph above. So the first one is a division question. So this was 3016 divided by 13. As you can see here, the child has used a long division method to solve that question. And you can see on the side here, they've written their 13 times table to help them out as well, to help them work through these calculations. So that's one type of division question the child may be encountering in the arithmetic paper. This is the type of multiplication question they'll be given to solve. So this is a 3-digit number multiplied by a 2-digit number. And as you can see here, the child has solved 678 divided multiplied by 4 on the first row, and then they've done 678 multiplied by 50 on the row below. And then they've added those two calculations up to give them the total of 36,612. But that's the kind of pitch that children will be grappling with when it comes to multiplication questions. So that's kind of the higher end around multiplying 3-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers. Again, relating to that expected standard by the end of Key Stage 2. We then have addition. So again, this is I forgot to mention the questions get progressively harder as well. So you can see here, this is question 1, 979 out of 100. So those other questions you saw were slightly further on, so they're slightly more complex and demanding in terms of what's required to solve them. So again, this is an addition question, just a very straightforward 979 out of 100. You'll notice that under each question there's space. There's a square grid for children to use that as space to solve the question. But the child here has been able to do it mentally and has just written the answer straight into the box. This is, again, a very similar subtraction question, style of question for subtraction. So 472, take away or subtract 9. And again, the child has been able to do that mentally and has just written the answer straight into the box. But again, if the child needed to, they could use the space below the question, the gridded area below, to solve that question if they needed to apply a written method to help them. This is a kind of mixed operation calculation using BibMath. So you can see here how the child has kind of broken those steps down. So they've prioritized the multiplication to give them 8. They've done 20 take away 8, which gives them 12, the 8 deriving from the 4 times 2. So again, they'll encounter those kind of mixed operation calculations as well. But again, children have spent a good amount of time working on this area of mathematics, so these types of questions will not be new to them. We also have percentages of amounts, so things like 95% of 240. So the child has worked through, started off by finding out what 10% of 240 is. They've used that to work out what then 5% of 240 is, and then from that, using multiples of 10 and that 5%, they've been able to work out that 95% of 240 is 228. But again, that's another good example of a percentages of amounts type question. We then have questions using decimals, so questions like 15.4, take away 8.88. And again, that mixed decimal placing for some children will be quite challenging, so that's quite a tricky question to tackle. But again, this child's been able to do it mentally, just in their head, and write the answer straight into the box. And then the final area, which is calculations using fractions. So 17 times 1.5. So again, you see how the child has worked through this, through these steps to get the final answer of 25.5. So again, using that space, that valuable gridded space, to come up with a written solution to the problem before committing to an answer in that box. So maths papers 2 and 3, which take place on Wednesday and Thursday, both are 40 minutes long and have 35 minutes each. So paper 2 requires children to demonstrate their mathematical knowledge and skills, as well as their ability to solve problems and their mathematical reasoning. So these papers are really focused around the following areas. So number and place values, including Roman numerals, which is a year 4 knowledge item. Addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, so those calculations. It broadens out at this point into geometry, such as the properties of shapes. Geometry focusing on position and direction. It looks at statistics. It looks at measurement, including length, perimeter, mass, volume, time, and money. There are some algebra questions as well to tackle. It looks at ratio and proportion, and looks at fractions, decimals, and percentages as well. So it's this whole much wider knowledge base around maths. And as I said before, the questions get progressively harder through the paper. And it's not unusual for a child to be unable to complete the entire paper in time, because they do get more and more challenging as the paper progresses. So it will create that slowness for children as they work through these much more challenging questions. Just to show you some examples again, So we have here, so again, it's much more problem-based, it's much more focused around the reasoning in a broader area of mathematics. So question 6, Stefan's watch shows 5 minutes past 9. The watch is 12 minutes fast. So what is the correct time? The child has responded here either in words or in a digital time of 7 minutes to 9 or 8:53. Some further examples. This one now is focused on Roman numerals. So again, very straightforward question. Here is a number written in Roman numerals. Write that number in figures. So CXV is 115. We then focus on, so here's an example kind of geometry related question. So a shaded isosceles triangle is drawn inside a rectangle. Calculate the size of angle A. So you see here, the child has, starting with the further angle of 38 degrees, has started to work through and show their method. And again, there may be some questions here which say show your method, because marks can be given if the child perhaps gets the incorrect answer but shows a viable method that got them to that point. So if it's the correct method but the incorrect answer, there is still sometimes marks up for grabs. So whenever that box sticks out saying show your method, children are really encouraged to show their method, because even if they perhaps make a miscalculation, as long as the method is plausible, they may still get a mark. And then just a couple more examples. So again, this is focused on measurement. So Chen pours 165 milliliters of milk into a measuring jug. Draw an arrow on the jug to show the level of milk. So again, it's reading scales and looking at where 165 milliliters would be in a scale that counts in multiples of 20 on the scale. And then just to round up a couple more examples. So again, another quite tricky one is around writing the number 53,148 in words. So again, you can see here the child has written it in the space below, being able to, relate figures to words and so on, and connect back to their spelling of those numbers. And then as a final one, again, just your straight up good old classic maths word problem. So a bag of lemons costs £1. A bag of 4 oranges costs £1.80. How much more does 1 orange cost than 1 lemon? Again, you'll notice the tab there that's just show your method. So again, even if children do get the wrong answer, there is possibly marks up for grabs still for showing a viable method. And again, that's a multiple step problem there. So the children need to break down that problem into steps and work through those steps to get to the answer. So that's the 3 test papers in a nutshell. I'm just going to spend the next few minutes thinking about how you can best support your child in preparing and what to do around that. So firstly, a positive attitude goes a long way. So as much encouragement and support as possible. I don't need to tell you that. I put that in brackets to really emphasize we don't need to tell you that. But obviously parental anxiety or worries can sometimes kind of reflect onto a child, and it's just making sure that the child doesn't feel overly anxious or overly stressed about going through these SATs tests. They shouldn't be a stressful or overly anxious period for the child. So it's making sure that you are remaining that kind of constant kind of font of support for that child throughout this week. So please, if you have any kind of questions or concerns that you have about these tests coming up in May, please, ping an email to the office, talk to your child's teacher at the end of the day, rather than kind of spill those worries over onto your child. Please, give your child opportunities to go outside and avoid overuse of screens. This is, we want the child to have kind of an enjoyable end towards year 6. And obviously, if we're strapping down with overly rigorous kind of revision schedules or committing too much of a screen to engage in learning materials, that's going to kind of almost tarnish how they see their end of year 6. So really make sure that they are getting that outdoor time and it's seen as a positive time in the weeks ahead. Try to provide a quiet corner of the house for homework and study. That's free from as many distractions as possible. So as a child, kind of as you approach that roadmap or that path to doing the test, just make sure there's a place for your child to focus and be able to kind of grapple with materials and allow them to concentrate in an effective way. Encourage your child to talk out to their teacher or other adult they trust if they express, real anxieties about the SATs. Again, a little bit of anxiety or worry is fine because, it's the first time they've sat tests formally, and that's to be expected. It's a high stakes environment. But again, if it's a persisting anxiety or it's almost overwhelming them, that shouldn't be the case. So, please encourage your children to speak to us so that we can help them manage how they view the SATs, because, for many of the children, we probably what they have as their view of the SATs is probably an over-exaggerated picture. So it's about actually giving them the correct picture in which, or the correct lens through which to see the SATs, to help them manage their own worries. Again, if your child's unwilling to talk to the teacher, engage with them yourself, and maybe then talk to the teacher afterwards on their behalf. But again, your children should not be overly anxious about sitting these tests, because that becomes a concern. And that's not what we want to put the children through. They shouldn't come out of these tests feeling overly worried or stressed out. That's not the purpose of them. Again, something that I always ask parents to do is to plan something nice and fun for the weekends before and after the SATs, because this will help the child start the week well, but also gives them something to look forward to after the SATs as well, because it's going to be a long old week for them. So make sure there's, no matter how small it is, just make sure there's something there for them to look forward to kind of end out that week, and again keep that positivity going for them. And again, as always, and it seems like a really silly point to make, but really make sure your child is eating and drinking well and getting a suitable amount of sleep. I know that children, 6 get into that age where, it's uncool to go to bed at a reasonable time, and they may not see the value in breakfast as much anymore. But really make sure your children are coming in to school having a good breakfast, but also making sure they've got their bottles of water to access, because it'll starting to get warmer in May. We want to keep them hydrated. We don't want their concentration to diminish because they're dehydrated. We're also making sure they get enough sleep each day so that they can actually concentrate for those sustained periods of time, because the reading again is 60 minutes long. So it's making sure children are best prepared, biologically speaking, to engage with that test. In terms of further tips, you could create a revision timetable if you want. If your child works well within a structure, if they're given a structure and they work well with that, please think about a revision timetable, which is just very just a very short amount of time. 10 to 20 minutes activity a day works best. You may want longer study times on Saturday or Sunday, but really just keep it short and snappy. Don't say you're revising for SATs for the next 4 hours or something that's unmanageable like that. Keep it short and snappy so that your child stays engaged with it and they don't feel overwhelmed by it. But maybe if you feel that your child would benefit from a structure like that, then please think about that structure so that they can manage their own expectations as they prepare for the SATs. Please avoid using past test papers because we use them at school to help us kind of prepare children for what the real SATs will be like. So obviously, if children are coming into the classroom and they're sitting, we're giving them snippets of a test which they've done at home. That's not going to help us in terms of supporting that child and helping them prepare for the test. Conversely, there's lots of free SATs materials for parents online. So if you just Google Year 6 SATs practice, you'll find a plethora of materials. I know Miss Barnes in a letter that was sent out earlier this week kind of signposted the Oak National Academy. I agree with that. With that share, the Oak National Academy started when we went into our first remote learning situation back in March 2020, that time ago, and it was a government-funded platform to enable children to learn remotely. And since that, it's absolutely ballooned, and they've created these amazing Year 6 SATs resources. So please have a look through those as well. And again, keep it light, nothing over onerous. Practice maths problems using real world context. I've got an example there, times tables on the walk to school, all that kind of stuff. Just keep it light and not so overly rigorous. Remember, this is about SATs. So SATs focus on what they know about maths and English. They won't reflect how talented your child is in science, geography, art, or PE, or any other broader subject. And they certainly won't highlight the positive personal characteristics such as that your child may have, such as compassion, kindness, respect. integrity, all those kind of things. The SATs doesn't capture that, so it just captures a very small proportion of who your child is. They don't tell the whole story. They will say if they did or didn't meet a standard, but they don't say by what margin. So it will say yes, your child didn't meet the expected standard, but it doesn't say for all that child knows, or we know, that could have been just missed by 1 or 2 marks on the raw score. So again, it doesn't tell you the whole story. It doesn't tell you by how much or how close. You may have a child that was who says they met the expected standard, but actually they may have been 3 or 4 marks away from reaching the greater depth standard. And again, you wouldn't know that, so it doesn't tell you by how close your child met or did not meet certain standards. Again, remember, SATs last for 1 week, so really think about now and that roadmap to the 9th of May, and then just forget about SATs afterwards until you see the results in July. It's not a big, don't make it a bigger deal than it has to be. It's just 1 or 2 papers lasting 30 to 60 minutes a day. We're going to make sure that the children have a really good curriculum wrapped around the tests, so we're not going to we want to make sure they're kind of excited about coming to school still, that they're really engaged with the curriculum we have planned for them. So again, the test is just a very small part of each day, and around each day, we're going to make sure the children have a really good educational experience outside of these tests. Because again, for us, we want them to value their educational journey through the school. We want to finish year 6 on a really positive note, and we want them to be ready for year 7 in the best way possible. And again, what should you do if you're worried to the school? So just to kind of reiterate this again, talk to the school. We're here to help. Speak to me if I'm on the gate. Speak to Miss Barnes if she's if she's on the gate, or if you catch her after school. Email the school. Grab the class teacher at the end of the day. Try not to kind of wait for them or ask them in the mornings, because again, teachers are trying to get the registers and the day up and running. But grab your teacher at the end of the day, or if you wanted a bit more time with your teacher, just email the office to ask for an appointment. Again, we're really here to help you. And again, we don't want your children worried, and we want to make sure that you and your child are best prepared for the SATs ahead. Again, spend time with your child. Try to understand what aspects of the SATs concern them most. Is it the worry of failing? Is it the worry of getting stuck on a paper? If your child can pinpoint what's bothering them the most, we can again reassure them, help them. So if you keep that communication open with us, we can support you. Try not to project your own anxieties or views in the SAT. So because your child will look to you for support and guidance. So obviously, if you're anxious about it, they'll pick up on that. Children are incredibly intuitive around their parents and carers. So make sure that you're being that kind of, as I said, that font of positivity for them, so that they're not picking up on your anxieties during this time. Confronting the media coverage, I'm sure we're going to see, on various websites and newspapers, how negative the SATs are. And if any of that is seen, please challenge that with your child. If they see themselves and they're saying certain things about the SATs, really challenge that. Really, keep it open with them, and reinforce the reality of what the SATs really are, which is just a handful of tests in a very short amount of time within a snapshot of your child's life. So again, it's not this huge scary monster. Again, encourage your child to talk to their teachers or phone notes. The SATs are obviously linked to school, so don't be surprised if they favour the reassurance of teachers about family members, because we see them day in, day out. We kind of take care of their educational journey, and we're kind of stewards of that. So again, make sure that encourage your child to speak to us, and again, if they're not comfortable, then talk on their behalf to us, and we're more than happy to pick up that communication. Okay, so with a minute to spare, thank you. No, we'll go over. It won't be a minute. But if there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I can't see any at the moment in the chat box. So if you have any questions, I'm just going to hang around here. Ms. Barnes is going to hang around here as well to answer any questions you may have in the chat. So if you just put them in the chat, just so we're not talking over each other, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, please feel free to leave. Thank you so much for your time. Again, this meeting has been rather recorded, so I will upload this when it's finally downloaded off of Microsoft Teams. I will upload it to the website so you can rewatch this. I'll also be sharing this the slides as well. But if you haven't got any questions, please feel free to leave now. And otherwise, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll work through them just the next few moments or so. Oh, great. We've got some questions coming through. So is homework being sent home to prepare or just use Oak Academy? So we don't want to overwhelm the children. So with kind of preparation for SATs. So the curriculum journey the children have been going on at this moment is preparing them for the SATs. So the SATs takes a sample of the child's kind of curriculum knowledge, and so what we're doing in our lessons is preparing them for that. We don't want to overburden them at home, but however, if as a parent, if you want to engage with more materials, I would really look at the Oak National Academy. I'd really advocate that. If you prefer something that's not techie and something that the child can work through, I'd really recommend the CGP Key Stage 2 SATs revision books. They're relatively inexpensive. I think they're less than £5 per book, but they are fantastic. They're very accessible for children. They are a great resource. So if you want something that you can just kind of whack out for 10 minutes a day for your child to work through, I really advocate those books. You can buy them online, WH Smith's. I believe Tesco now sell them as well if you go to that supermarket. And yes, we will be looking for something nice to do on the Friday, as is tradition here. So back in 2019 and before, we had a kind of a nice activity plan for the Friday for Year 6s, and we'll be looking to do the same as well, just to kind of end off that week to give them something to look forward to. Another one. So one more. Well, the first time they see the test format in 2 weeks. So they would have been so for a much longer period of time than this, they've been looking at SATs questions, and teachers have been taking snippets from previous papers. So children will be very used to the test question types. We map a lot of our questions within reading and maths to correlate to those question types as well. So they won't be new to the children. Also, I know it's a long time ago, but children who sat the Year 2 SATs will have experienced similar question types as well. So they'll have that familiarity from earlier in their educational journey, but also the way we create our questions and activities draw upon the way that certain questions are formed in the SATs papers. So children will be more than familiar with those question types. Okay, so I think that's all of our questions. So I'm going to end things here for this evening. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. It's really appreciated. I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely evening.